Welcome back to our one wild and precious lives and our dogs. Today, it's finally time to record the episode I promised you on toy reinforcers. I'm going to talk about two main types of toy reinforcers: tug and fetch. In this geeky toy play episode, we want tug or fetch to refer to any object. It's about the behavior of tugging or fetching, not about the object that's being tugged on or fetched. Because it can be any object, even something that isn't technically a toy, I want it on cue. And that cue can then become a marker cue. So you'll have two different cues that are signifying two different behaviors. One of those behaviors is tugging and the other one is fetching. You can tug on a ball and you can fetch a tug toy. You can also fetch or tug on shoes, on blankets, on pretty much anything you can think of. It's like dancing salsa and tango. I want to be able to dance both salsa and tango with Amy and Peter. I don't want to be only able to dance salsa with Peter and tango with Amy. That's why I need a word to let them know we're going to dance salsa now, and that they will understand and follow up with the respective dance moves. All right, let's dive right in. First of all, let's take a look at those toy reinforcers. We talked about food as reinforcers in one of the earlier episodes, and in that episode I said that food was a primary reinforcer. Can toys be primary reinforcers as well, even though they are not strictly necessary for survival? Or can they only be secondary reinforcers? Well, let's ask the expert, Paul Schranz. Here is his definition on primary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are sometimes said to be naturally or innately reinforcing. This is typically true, but it is more accurate to say that primary reinforcers are those that are not dependent on their association with other reinforcers. Besides food and water, examples include sexual stimulation, weak electrical stimulation of certain brain tissues, for example, the brain's so-called pleasure centers, relief from heat and cold, and certain drugs. Primary reinforcers are powerful, but they are relatively few in number, and in advanced societies, they probably play a limited role in human learning. So, what does that mean for dogs? Well, it means that toys can absolutely be primary reinforcers, but they are not primary reinforcers for every single dog out there. Some dogs do come hardwired with toy play as a primary reinforcer, and that's often the case for working dogs such as Belgian, Dutch, or German Shepherds, Border Collies, and Retrievers, and also for many mixes and individuals of other breeds. But there are also other dogs who do not find toys reinforcing, or who will only find them reinforcing if you pair them with primary reinforcers. So that would make the toy a secondary reinforcer for those dogs. Let me remind you what a secondary reinforcer is. Again, I'm going to give you Paul Schranz's definition. Secondary reinforcers are those that are dependent on their association with other reinforcers. Examples include praise, recognition, smiles, and positive feedback. For example, that's correct. The term secondary reinforcer indicates that these reinforcers are secondary to, are derived from other reinforcers. Ultimately, secondary reinforcers owe their effectiveness directly or indirectly to primary reinforcers. So, for dogs who don't come hardwired liking toys, can only ever be secondary reinforcers. That is to say, you'd have to pair them with a primary reinforcer such as food in order for the toy to take on reinforcing qualities. Today, I'm going to talk about dogs who do have innate interests in toys. Dogs who are curious about toys and for whom toys have the potential to be or become primary reinforcers. I'm not going to talk about dogs who have zero interest in toys. That would be a different podcast, and you would go about teaching these dogs to play with toys in ways that are different from the ways that I'm going to talk about to you today. If a dog has zero interest whatsoever in playing with toys, you'd also want to think about whether it makes sense to use toys in this dog's training. You might just want to use something else instead and make your life and your dog's life a lot easier. Anyways, so today I'll teach you 3 methods to teach fetch and 2 methods to teach tug to a dog who has the potential of finding toys innately reinforcing. Let's start with fetch. Method number 1. This is the method I like to use for dogs who already get toys and bring them back. Some dogs, for example retrievers, will already display this behavior as puppies. In this case, the behavior you are actually teaching in order to play fetch is the out cue. You'll pick a treat that is the same value as the toy. The fact that you have the treat will raise its value just above the toy the dog currently has because, the grass is always greener. What you have is more tempting than what they have. Toss the toy and wait for your dog to come back with it and wag at you holding their toy. Rather than grabbing the toy and trying to wrestle it out of your dog's mouth, show them a very tasty treat, for example a piece of bacon, and hold it next to their nose. They'll want to eat it and drop the toy. Pick up the toy and give them the treat. As soon as they have finished eating, throw the toy again. If your dog doesn't chase the toy but wants more bacon, you know you have chosen a food reward that is too high value for this exercise. Try again with something slightly less enticing than bacon, maybe a small hot dog slice or commercial dog treats. This will depend on how much your dog values toys and how much they value different kinds of food. You want a food the dog will let go of the toy for, but that doesn't hijack their brain in such a way that they can't go back to playing with the toy as soon as they have swallowed the treat. So you want that perfect Goldilocks treat, and you might have to do some experimenting. Let's say you found the perfect treat. So you'll toss the toy again as soon as the dog has eaten. If your dog or puppy chases it again without hesitation and comes back with it again, you know you're using the right value treat for this game. Now that you know this, you can start adding cues to your toy game. Personally, when using this method, I also use the opportunity to teach drop as a verbal cue. So my dog will come back to me again with the toy and stand in front of me, wagging at me and holding the toy. I'll say drop, which at this point has no meaning to the dog. I'll present the next slice of bacon next to their nose. My dog will drop the toy in order to eat. I click the moment they open their mouth to drop the toy, and then I feed them the bacon and pick up the toy. Once they have swallowed, I use my new fetch marker. Personally, I say chase for this, but of course you can use whatever you want. So I'll say chase, and then I toss the toy again. Repeat this throughout several sessions. If your dog is a training newbie, you're teaching or practicing 3 different cues in this session. Fetch, which means chase the toy I throw and bring it back to me. Drop, which means out the object in your mouth. And the click, which means eat food. After a while, you should see your dog outing the toy when they hear your verbal out and before you presented the bacon. That's when you know they're starting to catch up on the meaning of your out cue. Reinforce with a click and bacon a few more times, and then start cueing out, picking up the toy without feeding bacon first, and cueing chase right away. Now, your chase is reinforcing the dropping of the toy. You're starting to use chase as a marker cue, in this case as a marker for dropping the toy, and you are not dependent on food in your toy play sessions anymore. Method number 2, the 2-toy method. This is a great method for dogs who will chase but not necessarily bring back the toy, and for dogs who will chase and bring back the toy but not out it. You will have 2 toys. Ideally, these will be 2 identical toys. None of them will be higher value than the other. You throw one toy, your dog chases it, And then they pick it up and they either come back with it but don't out it, or they stay where they are with the toy. Show them the second toy now. You still have that second toy. Make that second toy come to life by tossing it up, like let's say it's a ball. Toss it up into the air and catch it. Pay attention to that toy, admire the toy, hide the toy behind your body and then bring it up again. Don't pay attention to your dog and the toy they have. Just pay attention to your toy. Make it seem as if the toy you had was the most amazing object you had ever encountered. And you don't want to walk towards your dog either. If at all, you want to walk away from your dog. You also don't want to look at your dog. You only have eyes for the toy you have. This tends to draw your dog in. Even if they don't usually tend to bring back the toy, they have this fascinating tendency to forget that they're holding a toy themselves. So they'll usually come back to you with the toy. Now they're standing in front of you holding a toy and wanting the toy that you have, which is identical to the one that they have. Keep tossing up the toy you have, making it seem interesting, until your dog realizes that they have to open their mouth in order to fit the other toy in. The moment they do that, you'll cue chase and throw the toy you have, and then you'll pick up the toy your dog just dropped. Now you'll repeat this procedure, making the toy you have more interesting again than the toy that the dog has. You'll have to keep doing that for a while, and it depends on the individual dog how long it takes until they catch on. But eventually they will learn that the fastest way to get the toy that you have is to come back with the toy they have and drop that toy. Since you're marking their dropping of that toy with your chase cue, they will also learn that chase means chase a thrown object. Once they're fluently displaying this behavior, you can start only using one toy instead of two. So you'll simply lose one of the toys and start playing with only one toy. Your dog is likely to repeat the familiar pattern of bringing back the toy they have, dropping it in front of you, and you can pick it up and mark chase and throw the toy. Now you have one toy and you've got chasing objects on cue, and you can use that cue as a marker. If your dog tends to chew on the toy or carry it to their dog bed, my recommendation is to play or start teaching this two-toy game in a room that doesn't have a dog bed in it, like your corridor, and use a toy that is not soft and squishy, so a toy that isn't fun to chew on. Do not use a squeaky toy. The black Kong balls, for example, are very good for this. They don't really give in when the dog bites down on them, so it is not very satisfying for them to chew. This makes it much more likely that they will spit out the toy they have in order to chase again, because chasing tends to be more reinforcing with a toy like this than keeping the toy and chewing on it. On the other hand, with a soft, squishy, or squeaky toy, it can be more reinforcing to keep the toy and chew on it than to chase another toy. As your dog gets more proficient in the two-toy game and eventually the one-toy game, you can of course start using different objects and even squeaky or squishy toys, and that will usually also work. But it is not the toy that I would choose for teaching it in the first place. Method number 3. Using tugging as a reinforcer for fetch. If your dog already loves tugging but isn't into fetch, you can use the game of tug as a reinforcer for fetching. Say your new fetch cue, for example, chase in my case, toss the tug toy, that is before you have started tugging, and encourage your dog to bring the toy back to you for the familiar game of tug. Keep doing this a number of times every time before you start playing tug. Soon you'll have a fetch behavior on cue reinforced by tugging. All right, now let's look at the second toy play behavior we're going to talk about today, tugging. Method 1 to teach tugging is for dogs who already love fetching but aren't big on tugging. In this case, you will do basically the same thing you did in method 3 for teaching fetching, only the other way around. Here we assume that your dog is already familiar with the game of fetch, but they aren't really into tugging. No problem. We'll just use fetch as a reinforcer for your new tug game. You'll use the familiar object that your dog likes, or a familiar object that your dog likes to fetch. Rather than going right into fetch, you'll present it to them, tease them a little bit with it, and the moment they put their teeth on it, you'll cue fetch or chase or whatever your cue is for chasing a thrown object. So you just reinforced teeth on the toy by a game of fetch. Your dog will bring back the toy, and again, rather than throwing it right away, you will wait for them to put their teeth on it a little more. You will maybe do a tiny little tug on it just for like half a second, and then you will cue another round of fetch. You will slowly and methodically increase the duration of your tugging and backchain that to a game of fetch that your dog already loves. Bit by bit, you are getting more tugging, lovelier tugging, more enthusiastic tugging, and longer tugging, reinforced by fetching a toy. Once the tugging you're getting before the fetching looks the way you want it to look, you can introduce a cue for it. My personal tug cue is tug. So you'll present the toy, say tug, and have your dog tug a little bit and then reward them for the behavior of tugging with a game of fetch. Or you will say tug, bring out the toy, have your dog strike the toy, tug a little bit, and reward them with their favorite game of fetch. Method number 2 is for dogs who love chasing things but aren't into tugging yet. This is the method I will use for pretty much all puppies. And that's because most puppies love chasing things. It doesn't really matter what kind of puppy you have. Most puppies are they're just curious about objects that are retreating quickly and they will follow them. Tie a soft tug toy. It could be just an old sock of yours, or a towel, or a fleece tug, to a rope. So you'll tie that toy to a rope. You could also get a fancy flirt pole, but this really isn't necessary. When your puppy or older dog is in an active state of mind, that is to say, they're awake, they're ready to do things, bring out the toy, show it briefly to your dog, and then make it run away. Have it circle your body by holding on to one end of the string, switching hands behind your back, and having the toy on the end of the rope circle you. Your dog will chase. You can suddenly have the toy change directions or bolt away in a new and unexpected way. Do this no more than 30 seconds without your dog catching the toy, and then have the toy disappear. It's gone. Your dog never caught it. You can look for it together. You don't know where it went either. It got away. Repeat this exercise later that day or the next day. Keep your dog at a state where they think they're about to catch it, but they just don't. Let them get very close but not reach it. Your dog's desire to catch the toy will go up with every session. Once they're chasing at full speed and only have eyes for the toy, let them catch it. Then, start gently tugging. The toy tries to wiggle its way out of your dog's mouth. If the dog is caught by surprise, they might let go and the toy will get away. Don't let them catch it again. Let them chase briefly, and then the toy goes back into hiding. The next time, your dog will hold on more tightly after catching the toy. Start gently tugging at the end of your string. Your dog is likely to tug back after the chase. They don't want to let the toy get away. I love something Denise Fenzi once said. Think of the toy as a critter, like a mouse or a squirrel. It never moves towards your dog. It tries to get away instead. It doesn't fly, so when your dog is chasing it, make sure the toy stays close to the ground to keep things fair. It may try to wiggle out of your dog's mouth some of the time, and other times it may play dead. Then, if your dog relaxes their grip, it will use that opportunity to escape. Use all these strategies, making the toy behave like a critter. So then you'll start gently tugging as your dog has caught the toy. Tug a little bit with your own body at a distance on the other end of the string. Then give in again. Tug a little bit, 3 to 5 seconds, then loosen the string again. Keep playing this game for another 2 or 3 sessions until your dog seems confident about this new part of it as well. Now, slowly start shortening the string. You're still pulling on the string rather than the toy as you're tugging, but your body is closer to your dog. If you're working with a sensitive dog, sit down or turn sideways to make the game less confrontational. Take your time shortening the string. 2 inches per session is good. Eventually, you'll have made it all the way to the toy. Now you're tugging with an actual toy, a sock or a tug toy or whatever you use. Stick to the strategy of short little tugs and then letting go. So you tug for 3 seconds and then your dog wins the toy. Observe what they will do. Will they push the toy back at you to keep going? Awesome, that's what we want. Reward them by tugging for 3 more seconds. This is how you grow a basic casual game of tug. Once your dog loves it, you can name it. Say, for example, tug, and then bring out the toy for your dog to tug on. Or bring out the toy first, hold it still, say tug, and let them strike. When they have made the connection between that new word and the game, you can start using the tug word as a marker cue for other behaviors. For example, you might ask your dog to sit, mark tug as soon as their butt hits the ground, and then bring out the toy for a round of tug. So now I've told you how to teach the basic behaviors of fetch and tug and how to add a cue to them. If playing and reinforcing simple life skills is all you are after, you should be set at this point. However, if you're looking for more, that is to say, if you want to use those toy skills as reinforcers in dog sports, there's an extra step you'll want to take. You want to have a routine of playing tug and fetch, not just the basic behavior. You want it to be ritualized and fluent and effortless. Remember how in the food reinforcers episode I said that food is easier to use than toys because you don't need to worry about getting it back? Your dog will eat the treat, and that ends that rep of reinforcement. Toys are different in the sense that you need the toy back in order to train another rep of the behavior. How you'll get that toy back will vary depending on your training goals and or on your dog's personality. I'm not going to go into this in depth here now, but I might in a future podcast. Meanwhile, if you really want to geek out about toy reinforcement, check out Shade Weitzel's toy classes at FDSA or her in-person seminars and workshops in the Washington State area. A link to Shade's stuff in the show notes. Here's just one more thing to get you going if you want to keep exploring this topic in more depth on your own. The trick is to think of toy play as a behavior chain. A trained behavior chain, just like healing. Don't think of toy play as a thing. Don't think of the ball. Don't think of the tug toy. Think of the behavior chain of playing with that toy or object. Doesn't even have to be a toy. Just like any other behavior chain, you will need to teach it and put it on cue before you can use it. How do you teach it? Well, you'll start easy. For example, in your house, where there are no distractions, and once it looks like you want it to look, you start practicing in more and more distracting environments. At this stage, you will still be working on toy play as a behavior chain. You will not be using it as a reinforcer for other behaviors yet. Did that get you thinking? Great! Reach out to me if you have questions or join Shade's next toy class or my reinforcement class at Fancy Dog Sports Academy. Talk to you soon, and happy training!